Yeah, like you're talking about Coco?
Welcome, everyone, to I Am No Man, the creative women of Middle Earth. This panel is being presented to you today at San Diego Comic-Con by TheOneRing.net. We started as a website in 1999 when rumors of Peter Jackson's films were in the ether, and are actually celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. You can find us at booth 1934. We've sold out of almost all of the t-shirts that we had, but we do still have some of our wonderful One Ring 25-year anniversary shirts if you're interested. We are an organization forged by fans for fans, and putting on panels such as this along with events is something that brings us as much joy as hopefully it brings the lovely attendees who come. Our next in-person event is going to be Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia over Labor Day weekend, followed shortly after that by the annual Baggins Birthday Bash at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, California on September 22nd. So if you're in Southern California, I hear it's not to be missed.
Although you miss it every year.
I know, because that's my real birthday. I'm a real hobbit. My name is K.M.Rice. I'm a volunteer staff member at TheOneRing.net. I also am a producer of a YouTube series called Happy Hobbit. And thank you. And as a writer, I have worked with Weta Workshop. Some of you may have gotten lucky enough to have purchased this ginormous book that Daniel Falconer and I authored together called Middle Earth from Script to Screen, Building the World of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit.
That's it.
Yeah, there you go. Seated to my left is Cathy Udovch, and she is the event coordinator at TheOneRing.net, and she is also a travel agent for There and Back Again Travel. Cathy has been a staff member from our site since the Fellowship of the Ring, and she has played a big role in planning Oscar parties, the Baggins Birthday Bash that I just mentioned, and West Coast convention appearances. She's also currently the Senior Features Programmer for the Newport Beach Film Festival and works as a travel advisor specializing in cruises to Australia and New Zealand as specialist destinations.
So you can go to Middle Earth. I'll send you to Middle Earth. I sent her.
Next to Cathy is Frederica Drotos, the steward and brand licensing of Middle Earth Enterprises. Frederica has a remarkable tenure spanning 2 decades. She has been instrumental in overseeing the Middle Earth brand throughout its evolution from Tolkien Enterprises to Middle Earth Enterprises, and now within Embracer Free Mode. With an extensive understanding of the property and its historical background, Frederica has amassed invaluable experience managing relationships across stakeholders. Her team has worked closely with major entities including New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers, Warner Electronic Arts, Warner Brothers Games, Vivendi, TT Games, Turbine/Standing Stone, Wizards of the Coast, and Weta Workshop. Her continued skillful guardianship of the esteemed Middle-earth property will be key moving forward, and we know that there's a lot of Tolkien stuff coming as we move forward. Next, we have Lisa Birchall, who's the head of business development product at Weta Workshop. Based in New Zealand, which many consider to be the spiritual home of Middle-earth, Lisa has been at Weta Workshop for 10 years, originally joining the company as the event manager, managing San Diego Comic-Con, among many other international events and activations. Lisa worked in the consumer products department as senior sales and operations manager before recently moving into the newly formed role of head of business development product, now working across multiple divisions at Weta Workshop, consumer product, game studios, tourism, and creative services for game. We are also joined by Margaret Mauvais, the Senior Art Director at Electronic Arts, also known as EA Games. Margaret was with Electronic Arts for 16 years, creating games for multiple platforms, including the PlayStation 2 and Xbox One. Some of the later titles were the Lord of the Rings series, which was based on the films by Peter Jackson. These titles included The Two Towers, The Return of the King, and The Third Age. The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age was one of the first games nominated for an award by the Visual Effects Society. We are also joined by Harless Snyder, who is the Global Events Manager for Magic: The Gathering. Harless has worked as a product marketing manager for The Lord of the Rings, The Tales of Middle-earth, which I believe came out last year. And she is also the co-host of a podcast called The Magic Story.
Do you want this up on the screen or not? Yes.
So to give you a little bit of context for the impetus of this panel, the first statistics you see were drawn from TheOneRing.net's Facebook page. They're not necessarily representative of the fandom as a whole, but unfortunately I couldn't find, if there are any sociologists out there, we'd love it if you could help provide us with some of this data. But as you can see, it's fairly split. It is slightly more male-dominated on the One Rings page, but it's pretty even split. And you can contrast that with the number of characters who, throughout Tolkien's work, he specifically named as female. And so there is a little bit of a lopsided aspect to his writing. That said, that does not stop us women from enjoying Middle-earth and from enjoying Tolkien and getting as much out of it as we possibly can. All of us have a special story about what drew us to Tolkien's writing. And I would love to hear, Margaret, I remember you had a really charming story. Would you like to start the conversation by sharing your experience?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I absolutely, I grew up in the Philippines, and discovering Tolkien or being able to relate to the wonderful world of the Lord of the Rings was something really new for me. My father handed me the book, The Hobbit, and I started reading that, and I absolutely fell in love with the Lord of the Rings. So got the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, the Return of the King. I went through all of those books. It was so different from anything that I knew when I was growing up. So, that was one thing that was really fantastic for me.
Lisa, how did you first get exposed?
I was first exposed, I think I was about 9 or 10, and we had this amazing teacher at school. His name was Mr. Newton. And we would all be out at lunch doing, I don't know, whatever, crazy chaos 9-year-olds do. And while we were out, he would draw these amazing illustrations on the blackboard of The Hobbit. Turns out he was this fantastic artist, but we were just 9-year-olds. And so we would come back in after lunch, and he would read us a chapter of The Hobbit every day. So that was my first experience. He was very smart, calming all these children down after their crazy lunch break. But yeah, I didn't obviously know at that time that I'd be working at Weta Workshop 20, 30 years later. Certainly didn't know I'd be at a panel. But I'm
Everyone should sit or pull the mics closer to you.
righto, Cathy.
Well, I would say, am I skipping out of turn?
No, not at
I was
all.
just
Just
gonna say-
lean up to the mic.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're getting notes from the
We were told these were really live and we should be really careful about being too close, but now I feel like I'm in a Moria. So my introduction was through people I would go backpacking with, mostly guys I'd fall asleep around the campfire. They're like, well, where did Gandalf go? I mean, before, where did Gandalf the Grey? And then he comes back, where do you think he went? And I'd just sort of fall asleep and try to read the books, and there were too many names. everybody has too many names. And I was just like, this is too much. I can't. But I got drug in, sort of like Frodo, at my job. You know, like, would you do this job? It's like, yeah, I'll go. So, and now I love it. I really am deeply smitten and probably possessed. So, anyway.
For me, it was pretty natural. I read everything when I was a kid. I lived in a really small town, and so there wasn't a ton to do. So I read everything I could get my hands on, and I got to this point where I was like, what else is there to read? And I was very fortunate growing up because I had this amazing librarian who also was my mom's librarian when she went to school, and she followed my grade from elementary to middle to high school. And she was so important in my life. She introduced me to so many things, but one day I came in and I was that kid that ate my lunch in the library. Anyone else? And one day she was like, I got a new book for you. You're gonna love this. And it was The Hobbit. And I remember devouring it in a day or two, just really quickly, just like, okay, this is great. And I was like, well, it ended. Oh no. And she was like, there's more. And I was like, oh. So that was how I got obsessed, we'll say, with this series.
Frederica, how has your career path unfolded? Because you play a very integral role for any adaptation of the professor's written word in either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I started out in the file room of this company that owned a record company and an independent film company. And in the file room, there's everything. There's contracts, there's scripts, there's distribution agreements, and letters and lawsuits. And so you learn a lot about a lot. And I quickly kind of became indispensable to many people. And at a certain point, we made a film called, well, before that, we'd made a film called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was distributed by United Artists. And when it did really well, of course, they said to the producer, Saul Zaentz, what are you going to make next? And he said, I don't know, but it's going to be a book. And they said, well, we have these books, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Do you want to purchase the rights to them? And he said, yeah, I do. And so, then long story, super short, we made a film called The English Patient with Miramax, and Miramax learned that we had these rights, and they were keen to make films. They knew about Peter Jackson being interested, and so we optioned the rights to them. But Harvey only wanted to make 2 films, because I guess his third film was going to, anyway, 2 films, and so Peter knew he had to make 3. So then Harvey optioned his rights to New Line, and that's what we now know and love. And we got really busy at this job where it was kind of, The Lord of the Rings was kind of languishing. Suddenly it was this big property, and my bosses said, can you help the person who's handling it? And I said, sure. And that was 2003.
Wow.
So since that time, a lot of changes, and it's really been fantastic because I've worked with all these people. Margaret, not directly, but because we made those great games with EA, worked with Nina, your colleague, but Wizards of the Coast, Weta Workshop, TheOneRingers, we're all kind of in this together.
It really feels like a community, and
Yeah.
I can't tell you how heartwarming that is, especially as a fan.
Well, and it's a community with the fans as well. So
Yeah.
it's within the creatives as well as it is with the fandom. So
Lisa, how did you get started?
I guess I got started because my role was at Weta Workshop. I had never been to a Comic-Con before until that was my job. And then I was here, so I was very quickly introduced to all of you lovely people in the room and TheOneRing. And it has just grown from there. Like everything I learnt, well, a lot of what I learnt about Middle-earth has come from the fans or from the experts that work at Weta Workshop. There's people still working there, obviously, that were there when we made the films 20 years ago. So I'm very lucky. It's such a huge part of, Middle-earth is such a huge part of the DNA of Weta Workshop. So, yeah, it's been fun bringing a little piece of Weta Workshop to you all here. Yeah.
Margaret, how did you get started?
Well, when Electronic Arts started working on the Lord of the Rings games, I was lucky enough to become the art director on those games, and it was fantastic to work on something that I was so passionate about. I don't think they realized how many books and how much stuff I already had about Tolkien. So this was a fantastic experience for me. I worked on the Two Towers. I worked on The Return of the King. I worked on The Third Age. Working on the games based on the films was fantastic because I was able to see all the iconography, all of the culture that revolved around each one of the races that they had created. You know, that was the story for this for the films. So that was what drew me into working on the Lord of the Rings. And,
I think I'm next. I have a different story. So I actually worked in the tech industry for a really long time. I worked in marketing. By the time I left tech, I was a director of product. And while I felt like I really understood what I was doing, I didn't feel super fulfilled from it. And I wanted to do something that would not only make me feel fulfilled, but the thing that fulfills me the most is bringing joy to other people. And the thing that brings me joy is games and fantasy and reading. And so in 2019, I was working in startups, which fun. And there was a round of layoffs, and I was let go in the round of layoffs. And I just thought, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I found a job posting for Wizards of the Coast. I was like, oh, Dungeons and Dragons, okay. And it was on the Magic the Gathering team. I had never played Magic before. Now I'm a very avid player. And somehow they gave me the job. And I've been working at Wizards ever since. I've been there for about 4 years now. I've been in 3 roles at Wizards. I started off as a product marketing manager on the product strategy team, and then moved to the emerging business team, which is where I met Frederica and her group as we onboarded the Middle Earth Enterprises group and started working on our set, The Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle Earth. And every day I got off the phone with Frederica, I thought, is this real? Is this my life now? This is amazing. So yeah. And now I'm a global event manager for Wizards, so I get to go to all these amazing conventions and meet all these people who love the same things that I do, and it's incredibly fulfilling, and I'm very glad I made that decision.
Margaret, you were sharing with me before the panel this really insightful story about what the landscape of the gaming industry was like when you first started. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
well, you know what? One of the things I'm going to tell a quick story about how I actually got into games. There we go. Okay. So I worked in a store when I first came to the U.S. Well, I finished college and I came out to San Francisco and I worked in a store, and this couple came in. And they were not very friendly, and I decided that I was going to be super nice to them, and I was really going to help them out. And they handed me their credit card when they finished when they were ready to purchase. And I saw I promise I won't make it too long, but I saw the name of an ad agency on this card. And I said, oh, you know what? I'm looking for a job as a graphic designer. I'm really interested in doing this. And they said, oh, that's very nice. Good for you. And he came back a few minutes later and he said, actually, we're looking for somebody. And when her things are ready, why don't you come to the office and talk with us? So it wasn't Electronic Arts, but one of the things that was really cool about that was we started working in computers, and I had a Mac on my desk. And an art director came up to me and she said, you really seem to enjoy doing that. My husband works for a company in Foster City. You might want to go and talk to them. So that's how I eventually got to Electronic Arts. And when I first started at EA, so 2022 for me would have been 30 years at EA. It was a very different company when I started, always a great company to work for. I was there 16 years in my first stint. I've been back 3 times, so third time's the charm. But it was a very different place. Well, in the sense that it was very male-dominated. A lot of times I was the only woman in the room, and you kind of get used to operating like that. But it's not that way now. I am working on a game that is primarily women. Even when I started working on The Lord of the Rings, actually, there was mostly men on the teams, but there were more women as we went along, which was fantastic, and that changed the whole face of the industry. So that's my long-winded story about the games industry. But I've changed, you know, my career has changed along with the games industry, and I find that it has gone from being very male-dominated and having a different approach to creativity, where now I think, you know, that actually is definitely the case at EA. Very inclusive, very conscious of that, very respectful. So it's been an interesting evolution for me.
That's a very good lesson in being kind to people.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Part of our inspiration for this panel was a desire to help raise the visibility and elevate the voices of these incredible women who are helping to bring Middle-earth to life in ways that we can all appreciate and enjoy. And for a lot of us, I don't know if we would be here if we hadn't similarly drawn courage from some of Tolkien's female characters. Harless, I know you in particular had a great anecdote about how it inspired you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I grew up in a really small town, and it was kind of idyllic in a lot of ways. I grew up on a farm in the woods. We had a horse. It's pretty cool. Grew crops, and what's really great is my family owned all the property, and so it was just my family living up there. It was my grandparents, my great uncle and aunt, and then their grown children who also had a kid. And so, I mean, I was literally like running around barefoot on the farm in the woods and just living my best life. But I always knew that I didn't belong there. I always knew that I wanted more than that small town had to offer me. And so Arwen specifically was so integral to me gaining that courage to say, even though I have my basic needs met, even though I live in I grew up in Appalachia, it's absolutely beautiful. Even though I have this isn't for me. And Arwen had the same thing. I mean, how many of us wouldn't want to have had Arwen's life growing up, right? But that wasn't for her. She decided to choose something else, and she decided to follow her heart and what was true to her. And without that inspiration, I don't know that I would have had the courage to do it myself when I was 24 and I moved to Austin, Texas with $200 and no job. But I did it because I knew that's what my heart wanted. I knew that that was what was going to lead me to bigger and better things. And oh my gosh, it was the best decision I ever made.
This is just an example of why inclusion is so important, and you can touch on that with expansion as well. And through a lot of the creative works from the wonderful women seated to my left, we have seen a lot of expansion of Tolkien's worlds. Harless, I'm going to turn to you again because you have a very recent property that just came out last year. Would you like to talk a little bit about your role in that and the rationale behind the art for those cards?
Yeah, absolutely. So while I didn't work on the creative team for the set, I basically worked, like I said, really closely with Frederica and her team. I was a kind of a partnership manager. That wasn't the title, but that's really what I was doing. And so it was my job to make sure everybody's happy and everybody is like happy with the content. And I don't know that I needed to be there because it was so easy for, thank you, Frederica. But it was just so easy for us to work together. And our world building teams, our art department, our creative department was able to, what we did at Magic was we looked at the source material. And all of us have seen the movies, all of us have seen these various interpretations of the movies and video games and things like that. But we wanted to go back to the actual books and to say, what if we reimagined this kind of from the ground up? You know, what are the actual descriptions of the characters and not trying, I think when you're making media, live action media, you are trying to match a face to a persona, right? And then that face becomes it just comes into your head and it stays there. And so I know our art department spent a lot of time unlearning what we perceived as the Lord of the Rings characters and the world as well. And Ovidio Cartagena was our art director, and it was his first set working for us, which is incredible, like, wow. And we, when I got to start seeing the art come in on the calls, because I got to go on every call and see everything as it came in, which was just a joyous experience, to be honest. Like, I work with some of the most talented and brilliant people I've ever met. And what we really did was, I got to see that art come in and see these powerful women being represented as so powerful. I almost cussed. And I love that we brought it to a more modern audience, and we took away all of and I mean, it's a solid year for our team to just unlearn the preconception of what these characters should look like, how they should pose. And, in Magic, we represented these characters on cards, and, the art is this big. And so you have to have it be this powerful moment. And seeing these cards come in of these moments in the book that were so powerful to me, and seeing them on cards, I mean, Éowyn is a great example. Arwen look how mischievous and fun and happy Arwen is here. And I'm just so happy we all are, with the way that it turned out, because we really did get to bring it to a fresh new audience. We got to reinterpret some of the characters as a little more diverse than some of the other interpretations have historically been, which was so important to us. We say in the building, magic is for everyone, and we really try to live by that. Our creative team is amazing and incredible at bringing that inclusion in. And I'm sorry, I'm going on for a while. But yeah, it really was such a labor of love. We say that Universes Beyond is a love letter to these other properties that we, as Magic: The Gathering, are big fans of. And I don't know a single person in the building who was not a fan of The Lord of the Rings. And I think that love really shows in our set.
Definitely. Isn't there's something like 1,300 art pieces,
Yeah,
800 artists? I mean,
yes.
It's a phenomenal amount of work. But I'm really happy you're showing Aragorn and Arwen there, because if you go back to the book, we had a lot of discussions about how Aragorn looks, and obviously he's not going to look like Viggo. And this is the thing that's amazing about this property, is we work with so many different licensees, and everybody has a different vision for the same characters in the same places. And in this case, I remember Ovidio presenting the card. He said, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this. And we looked, and he looks so Aragorn. I mean, he embodies that character. You go back to the books and you read the passages, and nowhere do you get necessarily a description of Viggo, but he fits, kind of, as does this fellow. And in fact, this fellow has silver in his hair, which the books talk about silver streaks in Aragorn's hair. And most everyone has loved this. There were fans who said, I finally see myself in this story that I love so much. A few people wrote to us and said, I'm never going to read The Lord of the Rings again. I read it all the time and not going to, because you've become so woke. You've gone outside. You've gone outside the lore. And we had to go back again. No, it's not about being woke. It's about not assuming you know believing what you think. Actually going with it. Thank you for that.
I will add one more thing to that, which is that we have an event at Magic called MagicCon. It's really cool. You should go to it. But one of the things we did when we celebrated The Lord of the Rings at MagicCon, which was in Barcelona, was that we got a cosplayer to be Aragorn. And his name is Ugo Cosplay. He's amazing. And he looked like he came right off this card. Like, people were like, did you pose for this? He was like, nope, I didn't. But the number of people who came up to him, I had the pleasure of being able to be his kind of cosplay handler at the show. And so I got to view all these interactions as they came, and the number of people who just said, this means so much to me, was so many people. And it was, I almost in tears multiple times during that convention because I got to be a small part of bringing that to life, and it was just so meaningful to so many people.
Margaret, was there any particular female character in Tolkien that really drew you in?
Oh, well, Eowyn's, like many people, of course. Yeah, Eowyn is one of my favorite characters. I think that she rose to the occasion, right? She challenged the idea of what a maiden should be, and she did something hard, which I thought was fantastic. That character really resonated with me. One thing I just wanted to say about, just really quickly, and then we should go back to the female, to the characters. Being a creative working on The Lord of the Rings is really hard. Trying to figure out how to make the characters, give them something that has that twist that is so respectful to The Lord of the Rings, because that's what we all love, right? Finding that hook that says, this is what The Lord of the Rings looks like, but giving it a twist that makes it look appropriate and respectful, but doing something new and exciting. So it's a real challenge, right? And doing all of the reference gathering and all of that. I mean, I already talked about all the books, but that's something that is so important. And we're so lucky, right? There's all this wonderful, rich, these books, all of the research that everybody has done, all the stories. But it's tricky. It's tricky. Anyway, just to go back, Eowyn is the character that I always go back to. I think that she impressed me and she resonated with me, and it's something that I've always taken with me. And I use that name on so many things, and when I name something, the kids look at me and they're like, "Oh, is that a Tolkien thing again?" But anyway, so that. Anyway.
And, as a testament to your journey in your career, I think Lisa could piggyback off of that by sharing a little bit about an upcoming video game that Weta Workshop is doing, because your lead producer, correct me if I'm wrong, is Calliope Ryder.
Correct. Yes, we're very excited. Well, hopefully a lot of you have already heard that we have Tales of the Shire coming out soon. So it will be in 2024. But it's really exciting for the team at Weta Workshop. We've been working on it for a number of years, obviously. But to, again, do a new interpretation of the books and to give fans something new and something different, something cozy, the chance to live out your fantasy life, I guess, as a hobbit. I think it's really cool because the books and the movies, to some extent, tend to focus on the adventure and all the action that happens outside of the Shire, whereas this is just about staying at home, and a lot of people like to do that, particularly these days, with everything that's happening in the world. I think it's a game that everyone's hopefully going to really love. So you can, and talking about adding new characters, it's fully customizable. So you can create your own hobbit, which we hope, I guess, is more reflective of the world we live in today, which will be great. We're really excited. I hope you will love it when you see it.
It's my most anticipated game right now. I cannot wait to play it.
Good.
I think the great thing about Tales of the Shire is it's the place that everybody is trying to save, right? And we've always, games and movies have really focused on the battles to save that thing rather than that life and culture itself. So when they when you all proposed this to us, and I don't know, 1 million years ago, it seems.
Yeah, it seems like
we were, yeah, remember Joe said, it's cozy in your pocket, because it was going to initially just be a mobile game. Cozy in your pocket became the thing. Yeah, and now it will, and it will be. So, looking for that.
Yeah. And Frederica, where did you just fly in from? Because
Chicago. I just came in from Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why was I there?
Yeah. What were you doing there?
There. Oh. So we have a new play. It's actually not it's a new iteration of a play that was around in Toronto and the West End in 2006. And it's been this really genius director in the UK at the Watermill Theatre last summer premiered this, telling the same story, but from the point of view of the hobbits. So it's very much, Tales of the Shire. Yeah, it is. It's quite charming. I'm pretty chuffed, I would say, about it. And what's really interesting in it, that Merodach Brandybuck, Mary, is played by a female, but playing Mary. And I asked the director last night, I said, Paul, did you cast a female, because we don't have, Éowyn's not in there, and it's weird, I'll just have to admit, I love Éowyn also, and it didn't dawn on me until I've seen the play 30,000 times that she's not in there. It's weird, I didn't miss her. That says something, I don't know what it does, so you all can go to your...
We'll get all Jungian on
whatever
you.
that journal is.
Freudian.
Yeah, the whole Freudian, or something. Anyway, Mary, I said, did you, because of Durnhelm, and Mary rides into battle with Durnhelm. Durnhelm being Éowyn, right?
Yeah.
And so was that your stealth way of referencing her? And he goes, oh my God, Frederica, no. I said, well, I thought it was so genius. And he goes, yeah, I'll take that. Yes, yeah. So anyway, I hope if you can go to Chicago before September 2nd, because it closes on September 1st, it's really worth it, totally worth it. But if you can't, it's going to Auckland.
Yeah, so just come to New Zealand.
Yeah, so go see the Weta folks, go to Weta Cave, go to the film sets, it'll be perfect.
And it's going to be at the Civic Auditorium, which is just down the hill from Sky Tower. So if you're, sorry, the big Sky Tower, it's there, Space Needle. It's just 2 blocks down.
The workshop Unleashed.
Yes, what a shop, yeah, works.
So many things you can do when you're there.
And the theater itself is beautiful. I've seen several musicals there. I've actually seen Mary Poppins and Phantom of the Opera there. But it's this beautiful theater, like those old palaces with the decor. It's stunning. So go to New Zealand if you can't go to Chicago. Although Chicago is awesome too.
It is.
It's my favorite, one of my favorite U.S.
Frederica, you were saying how you'd seen the play like 300 times, and it took all that time for it to occur to you that Éowyn was missing.
Yeah.
That this integral, vital female character was missing. And through the conversations that we've had preparing for this panel, an observation that I've had, and I don't know if this speaks to any of you as well, is that so often we encounter a property that we love, and there may not be a strong female presence in it, and I still accept it wholeheartedly. And I grapple with that, and I grapple with, why is that the case? Do I want more representation in it? Does it matter? And where I'm at in my journey of understanding my relationship with Tolkien is that I found it so easy to accept because it was so representative of the world that I was born into. Harless, you put it beautifully that Éowyn has this burst. She has this tremendous burst.
Yeah, Éowyn is so amazing to me because if you parallel it with reality, with real life, oftentimes in history, I think scientists are a great example of this. Some people will take credit for women's work and then write them out. But there are moments in our history where women have been so impactful. They've had these bursts, these moments of bravery, of courage, of raw emotion that comes out that you can't ignore. And that makes it into the history books, right? And for Éowyn, she goes through some turmoil. She doesn't always have things like the easy. She's not always like in the foreground. But look what she did with that burst of courage and bravery when she realized it was up to her to make this happen. And I think that, like I said, it just parallels with reality so well. And hopefully we're getting out of that. Hopefully people are getting the credit they deserve. And really getting that recognition. But yeah.
It's kind of embarrassing to admit, that I didn't notice she wasn't there when she is so significant. And it is a tale told by the hobbits. So maybe Mary should have brought it up. So I'm going to blame Mary. But I also think it's part of the culture and how I've been brought up in the world where women women do incredible things, whether it's raising their children and that's what they do, or they raise their children and they go to a job, or they create computer code or break codes for, the British Secret Service.
Yeah.
But they don't really get the recognition for having done it. Usually, and you can see it in your workplace sometimes, where a man will step up and receive the award, or for something that a bunch of women colleagues have done. So it's
That's something I'm a little sensitive about, because I feel like even within our fandom, there's a lot of recognition of Peter Jackson and his accomplishments, and rightly so. But I also feel like not enough light is shed on two very significant women who, if they were not participating, we would not have those films. And those women are Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh, who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And Philippa was hoping that she would actually be here in person to be on this panel. And in lieu of her being here, she sent something for me to read out. And after I read it, if we have time for any questions, then we'll answer your questions if we're allowed. So Philippa says, Fran Walsh and herself, Philippa Boyens, would like to send their love and well wishes to everyone attending the panel. They also were hoping that I would pass this message along, and that is that they want to encourage any young women filmmakers out there in the audience to pick up your pen, your camera, your imagination, and your passion, and start creating. We need you and your voice in the industry. Persevere. Don't take no for an answer. Don't let setbacks and stumbles define you. And whatever you do, do not let any antiquated, misogynistic person make you doubt your ability to tell any damn story in any form or fashion you choose. In the words of Helm Hammerhand to Hera in the upcoming War of the Rohirrim, you, my daughter, could rule the world. So this is where you can find us. Is there anything you guys want to share about where anyone in the audience who's interested can track you down?
I'll start. As Kelly mentioned earlier, I do a podcast called the Magic Story Podcast, where we narrate the story of Magic the Gathering. Magic has a beautiful, very lore-heavy story, and sometimes it can be intimidating to get into. So we started a podcast where we narrate the story, and then we recap it. And so you can find that on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you listen to podcasts. But if you're not a podcast girly, you're more of a YouTube girly, you can also find it on YouTube. If you go to mtgstory.com, you can find that. And it's such a rich world. There's so many strong female characters in our sets, and I just encourage you, if you're interested in Lord of the Rings, to check out the Magic Story as well.
Anyone else on socials? Nope. Then we probably have just a couple minutes for some questions. So if anyone's got a question, there's a microphone right there.
So it's been a while since I read this, so I may get one or two details wrong, but a while ago I read an article that Tolkien Tolkien used his desire for the world to go back to nature and projected that through the women in his universe. How do you think that's influenced his women, and how do you think that's helped draw women into Tolkien's universe?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
I'd say that I feel like he very successfully represents women almost as archetypes. you can feel the influence of the folklore. You can feel the influence of the indigenous European cultures that he was drawing from when he created this world. And for me, that level of authenticity is part of what makes Middle-earth palpable. It's part of what draws me in particular the elves and the elven women. And of course, if you want to get into the Silmarillion, the forces that created and shaped Middle-earth, I think he does a beautiful job representing, I'd go so far as to say the divine feminine, through his expression of the natural world and indeed through his female characters. Does anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think empowering the trees and the ants, the tree herders to have agency. That's really powerful for me.
So one thing, when I was researching The Lord of the Rings, trying to figure out a different way to represent characters, one of the things that I found out was each race is associated with a certain element. And the elves are associated with the forest, for example, and water, and the hobbits are associated with something else. So I really, that is part of the whole story, I think, of The Lord of the Rings, where that's the characters and the races are all associated with nature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this question is primarily for Lisa and Harless, and also for Cathy, but I'd love to hear from all of you, honestly. Because you guys are event coordinators. As such powerful, accomplished women in the adaptation realm of Middle-earth, what advice can you give for women creatives, content creators, scholars, myself as an event coordinator, for establishing yourself, your voice, making your voice heard, and leading with confidence in a still often man-led and authoritative fandom and community?
That's a tough question. It's a great question. Yeah, I think for me, I think I spent a lot of my career trying to fold into a box that I was meant to be in, whether that was the way I dressed at work, the way I didn't interrupt, didn't speak up in meetings. And I would just say your voice is just as important, if not more important, because there's less of it. And I no longer let people talk over me. And I'll say, I'm so sorry, I'm not finished. Can you give me a moment? Or, thank you, I already knew that information. So just don't be afraid to stand up for yourself because you absolutely belong there. And just because someone may have a little more experience than you or a higher title than you, that doesn't mean that they know any more than you do, or even as much as you do sometimes.
Correct. 100%.
That's right. Harless knows a lot. I would just say I've probably done things differently to a lot of people. Like I just try to let the work speak for itself. And if someone tells me I can't do something, then it will be my absolute mission to prove that that is not the case. But yeah, good luck. Event coordination is hard, but it's so fun. And when it all comes together, like, that's the magic. And that's what the goal is. Like, you just have to do all of these things first to get to the point where you get to enjoy it. And it's so fun. Like, you just make sure you have a really good team around you. I think that's the thing. A supportive team is key.
Yeah, especially in the events industry, that's, oh my gosh. One person does nothing on their own.
And Red Bull.
Yeah. Yes.
Drink a lot of Red Bull.
So when it comes to TheOneRing.net, since we're a volunteer organization, I just started suggesting ideas for things for line parties for the Golden Globes viewing party, where we raised money for a server because hamsters weren't working anymore. And we did some Oscar parties, and the first one we had 5 weeks to get it all put together, which meant we slept, we had no sleep, but you just did the work. You just kept sending the emails, kept sending the ideas, kept doing the work. After the movies were done and we're like, well, where are we gonna go from here? We teamed up with a professional convention company. And I had opinions about this company because I had worked with them as a volunteer for security and things. And I wrote a 5-page long note to one of the founders of TheOneRing.net saying, this is how things are with this company. Do we want to be involved with them and everything? He came back and said, you are our new point person. You're the coordinator between TheOneRing.net, and I'm not going to name the company, but this professional company. And so I then was very adamant about the fact that we weren't just going to be actors and autographs and photos and you take all their money. We were going to have academics and the linguistics, and we were going to do screenings, and we needed an art show. And so I added all of this stuff, and it went so well, they started incorporating some of those things in some of the other properties that they worked with in their conventions. So I just basically said, this is how we're going to do it now. So that's sort of how I got to the big things. And I think we're done.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you all so very much for coming. And if you are here tomorrow or here after the panel, do stop by booth 1934 to say hello.